Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Hope you're doing well on this very sunny Friday in Geneva. Freudian slip here, but it's better if it's Friday because you can anticipate the coming weekend. Sunday is depressing because you anticipate the coming week. In this video I'm going to be doing a bit of rambling. Be prepared for this because my thoughts on the topic that I'm going to be tackling, they're not completely formalized. I don't exactly know where they are headed as their final destination, if there is one, but still I thought they were worth sharing. And there are thoughts that I've been having regarding the introverted intuition function specifically of the INFJ, of the INTJ, that is as a dominant function. And the influence that that function has on the way that anti-dominance relates to the question of the nature of the nature of reality. It's a deeply metaphysical question, you know. I think that if you take metaphysics, not in the technical metaphysical sense, but more in the sense of just being a questioning about the nature of reality, the nature of God also, as potentially the origin of reality or the guardian of reality for some people, the cosmos for other people, the logos for yet other people. All these questions, I think, are very common for INFJs to consider. And there is a certain attraction that I've seen towards explanations that are not always starting at the level of like rational analysis, but more starting at the level of intuition, insight, followed by an attempt at rationalizing it, which makes complete sense given the function stack of the INFJ. And from discussions with INFJ friends online, in this case, at least a good few of them, I've realized that this metaphysical vision, this metaphysical questioning about the nature of reality that we end up asking ourselves about, it tends to be directed toward the same things. And if you think about it, this is something incredibly profound and incredibly striking about typology in itself, or about the Jungian analytical psychology of types, because if having a certain dominant function means that you're going to tend towards having a metaphysical vision that is, if not shared, at least similar in parts to the metaphysical visions of other people sharing your function. Well, what is deeper than that? What is deeper than to share this commitment about the nature of reality? And what is this commitment? Well, it seems to me that it is a commitment to the oneness, what I call the oneness. And so this idea that everything is connected, that everything that is in reality, everything that we see around us, including ourselves, is part of a whole. It's not dualistic, it's not separated by other entities or deities, that we are all connected somehow. And that if we were to look at the finest grain of the substratum of reality, we would see this oneness and we would see how we are all connected. And this is not a view that is so uncommon for people to hold, whether they know it or not. A commitment to the oneness of reality is one that we can trace back to before the birth of Christ. So you see it in the philosophers of, in the Western tradition, but the Greek philosophers of ancient Greece. You see it in Buddhism. You see it in Taoism. You see it in the philosophy of many Stoics. You see it in the philosophy of Spinoza. And guess what? A lot of the time, the people who were behind these philosophies were anti-dominant. Either INFJ or INTJ. People who tend to see reality as an undivided whole, which then translates to our perception into the world of events as the immensely complex universe that we see. The idea that there is a oneness behind it, we all belong to a oneness, is the vast majority of the time an NI insight. It's very interesting. Spinoza is an INFJ. Heraclitus is an INFJ. It's quite possible that Buddha was an INFJ. Plotinus was an INFJ. A Neoplatonist philosopher. I think he was an INFJ. And so you see that everywhere. And among my INFJ friends, when we discuss these topics and when I talk about my own views, there's many of them who intuitively find something that resonates with them. And I'm really talking about the intuitive level here, not the level of rational, logical articulation and explanation. Of course, I work on that too, but there is this agreement somewhere. It's fascinating, and it happens a lot more often and a lot more seamlessly when I'm talking to anti-dominance. And when you think about it, when you think about introverted intuition, isn't it its function in a way, and I mean no pun here, that to see everything in terms of a oneness of patterns, to take a lot of different insights and synthesize them into one single meta insight that congregates all the others. It seems to me that that is essentially what NI does, and that's what it does for me. It applies in my life. It applies in reality. It's almost impossible for me, whenever I take an interest in something, to take an interest in it for its own sake, which I think as this kind of disinterested study for study's sake or for knowledge's sake is something that is often associated with NPs, INFPs, INTPs, ENFPs, ENTPs, being interested in something, doing it, engaging in it, and deriving insights from it. But for me as an NJ, what's happening is that if I like something, if I'm attracted to it, one of the very first things that I attempt to do is to see how it fits within my oneness of pattern of how I make sense of the world and how I make sense of my vision of the world. It's not something that I can just take in addition to everything else. It has to be synthesized rather than added. Okay? Synthesis rather than addition in this case. So I'll be learning about a particular new current of thought or even a music group, and often I try to connect, see how it makes sense within my vision, my worldview. And it's a very unique to me worldview in many ways. It's what gives me my sense of identity in many ways. It's where I bathe in my introverted intuition in many ways. And at the same time, it seems that it's shared by other anti-dominants. This difficulty with just taking things and studying them or engaging them for their own sake, but having to always make sense of them within this larger whole. That is just what anti-dominants do all the time, which means that They tend to be very consistent and systematic in how they articulate their worldview. The issue being that they can have difficulty with updating it if it's kind of like causing problems or not adapted to a particular situation. It's hard for NI dominance to kind of call into question parts of the whole, because it makes sense to us as a whole. And it can even apply when you're like working on a dissertation for university or an essay. Say like if you're working on a dissertation and you have your whole framework done, to make adjustments to the different, it's hard to make adjustments to different parts, because we're so attached not to the parts that we are refusing to update, but to the larger whole that we think we might be disfiguring if we were to bring those updates, which nevertheless might be necessary, and we can do that, but it's harder for us. And I think there is a connection between that vision of our own worldview, our vision of our life, our vision of how we make sense of the world, and our vision of how we interpret the fundamental nature of reality. So we have the oneness in ourselves and the oneness in the cosmos that we see. And we see ourselves often as an extension, or not necessarily an extension, but an incarnation of the cosmos at a micro level. And I just find that very, very common in INFJ philosophers, INTJ philosophers also. And in the view of some of my friends and myself, to the extent that sometimes when I talk to my friends about this, it's almost as if we don't just share this this conviction about oneness, the oneness of reality, but it's almost like even the way in which we articulate it and what we view it as when we have allowed it to mature in our minds, it's almost like it's the same thing. And if it is the same thing, is it a subjective thing? Or is it an objective thing that we end up seeing each from our own perspective? So is there like a similarity in subjectivities that could be deceptively objective looking because it is so similar? Or is it a dissimilarity, slight dissimilarity in our own vision of an objectivity, which would be the oneness of reality, the oneness of being? It's just a very, very fascinating thing. If like the floodgates for this kind of interpretation are opened by Jungian analytical psychology and the cognitive functions theory, you know. But, you know, I see it so much that, in fact, it's almost for me now a giveaway for a person's INFJ-ness or NJ-ness. And, in fact, not necessarily always dominance NI. It could also be ENTJ-ness and ENFJ-ness, more rarely. Because NI auxiliaries don't bathe in NI as much. But, for example, for me, it's a giveaway that Jordan Peterson is an NFJ of some sort, or an NJ for sure. Not that it is a controversial thing, but an NFJ probably, because he has that vision of oneness as well. He wants to see everything as connected, you know. When he talks about the truth, the metaphorical truth of religion as being true in a sense, is because if everything partakes of the oneness, everything is true in a sense from a different perspective. And so, from Buddha to Peterson, through less illustrious people like myself and friends, we just seem to all have that vision. And sometimes that can be encouraging us to believe that it's really something, that the cosmos is one, and we're all expressions of it. One of the most striking and beautiful films, I think, of this decade is The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick, an INFJ, almost certainly, who is about the oneness, the cosmos living in us, pantheistically. And, you know, all the scenes in this movie are about the oneness. And it's yet another INFJ who has made this film, and I bet that any INFJ who watches it is going to, I'm not saying that every INFJ is going to love it, I don't want to be deterministic like this, but I'm pretty sure it's going to speak to INFJs. So that's my question to you. Have you had those thoughts before about things being all connected, about the oneness of reality, cosmos, God, or whatever spin you have on it? And have you watched The Tree of Life? And if you did it speak to you in some way? Alright, it's been a bit of rambling, so I'll stop here. I'll talk to you soon, but these were my thoughts on NI. And I think that if this resonates with you, may suggest, again, that you know, you're indeed an NI Dom. Do you feel this drive towards seeing everything as one? It could also be linked to NI and FE, so a more INFJ than INTJ thing. And maybe I'll explain to you why I think that in the next video. Alright, see you guys. Have a lovely day. Bye.